Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City at 8th Cloud Expo. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're watching this lunchtime power panel on SYS-CON TV or cloudexpo.com, 1.8 million pages, those screens. I hope we're not irritating but entertaining. We have the largest power panel ever mounted. It's a kind of an industrial operation today. We want to greet, I better do it for them so they can just acknowledge who's here. We have Rich Wolski, CTO of Eucalyptus Systems. We have Vineet Tyagi from Impetus. We have Bill Zack from Microsoft. We have Scott Chasin from McAfee. We have Mark Hinkle from Cloud.com. We've got Logan McLeod from Dell. And we've got Zack Smith from Voxel. So it matters not really where they come from, it matters what they tell us about the cloud, because we're always interested to know what is going on, and obviously we have to start, because you guys know your stuff on this. What a terrible quarter for cloud. So you're all out of business, right? All these breaches, all this awfulness. I don't know where we should start, but it'll be with you, Rich. Are we finished really in the cloud?
Oh, heavens, no. No. I mean, at the beginning of any technology, it's often the case that you see great upside and occasional hiccups. In some sense, I think what you may be referring to is a recent unfortunate incident with one of the largest public cloud providers. If you think about it, that's really generated by their popularity. If they're generating lots and lots of usage, lots and lots of transactions, then it's likely that something bad is going to happen every now and then. And the more they do it, the more likely it is to happen sooner.
All right, but that does beg the second question, Richard, which is the cloud going to be a victim of its own success? Is it just the largest attack surface in the world, in the history of technology?
Linux is a pretty big attack surface, and we've managed to be able to deal with that. I think popularity will win.
All right, let's see if that's true. Down the line, who wants to jump into this? Is it a self-correcting prophecy? Oh, I wouldn't hesitate. If I were you, I would not hesitate. I would jump right in. We have to ask you, Scott. Come on. Wear your McAfee hat.
Say it again. I can't.
Well, so is it going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy? Is this going to correct itself? The more we have people trying to attack using the cloud as the attack vector, the faster we will make it safe.
So is the attack surface larger? Absolutely. Is the focus there today to go after it? No. Because the endpoints,
but as a result of this
the endpoints are still extremely weak, right? But does that mean that the shift is going to happen? Yes, absolutely, the shift will happen. But I think that we all can agree that the centralization and the focus of the technology stack inside the cloud ecosystem is going to make it more tough to penetrate than, let's say, the average endpoint. There's still going to be a lot of focus on the endpoint because you can at least hijack that end of the transaction, right? That doesn't mean that we're not going to see these attacks that we've seen over the last few weeks. But I would also challenge you that these aren't necessarily cloud attacks.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm only yanking you at Shane. Logan, I mean, Dell has to be end-to-end. So how much emphasis on security for you guys?
For Dell, the emphasis is huge on security. We all recognize that one of the barriers to entry into cloud for enterprise IT is making sure that we can provide cloud services in a secure and integrated manner. Those are the number two, the top two priorities for enterprise, and for Dell specifically. We've made recent acquisitions in this space to make sure that we're a prominent player in this space, enabling our customers to move to the cloud. So.
Simple question now, missing tools. I mean, everything to ramp me up onto the cloud is already dealt with? Or is there some maybe higher hanging fruit that's not been gotten to? Who's going to tell us what still needs to be offered?
Costing tools. What we don't have is a really good way to figure out, to predict what the cost is going to be, particularly for hybrid clouds, where you have some sunk expense in a private cloud and then a pay-as-you-go or bursty expense in a public cloud. And being able to come up with a cost model so that you can do annual budgeting that's reliable is something that's not there.
How is that going to happen? I mean, it sounds great. I want it already, but how?
Yeah, I think that we have to come up with new accounting systems, primarily in the enterprise, that deal with self-service. Enterprises typically look at quarterly budgets, and you've got much more of a self-service dynamic model. That's what the cloud is doing. It's streamlining the IT operation. And so we have to think about accounting systems, which have existed in other areas, but not necessarily in enterprise IT, that can deal with that flexibility.
I like that. That's good. I'm still looking for missing elements, so now we'll switch to open source. Mark, open source is not missing in the cloud. Otherwise, Rich wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. But what's the future? What's the trajectory?
I think that the actual tools that can be integrated to automate the provisioning and deployment and management of the cloud are really where the future is, because now you have a situation where one person with one credit card could spin up 100 servers in a few minutes, but you need to figure out how to scale your resources to manage those virtualized servers, and I think that's really where the tools and the management are going, and open source's the tool set and tool chains that are there are well suited to do that from a systems management standpoint.
And I'll add on to that. I mean, I think that from an open standards perspective, we need transparency. We don't have it yet. Right? So from a public cloud perspective, for any enterprise that's thinking about moving into the cloud ecosystem, whether it's infrastructure, platform, or service, it's like you're moving into a room with no lights on, right? And as an industry, we need to figure out how to turn the lights on. And so transparency as a service that can provide the visibility and instrumentation that you're used to having within your own infrastructure needs to be there. And there are some great working groups that have started that are trying to address this.
But this is going to be self-regulation is the only way forward, I'm guessing?
Well, I mean, I think that what's going to win is what gets to market first. In the commercialization effort will, I think, bring that about of things like cloudaudit.org, which are looking at creating standards so that you can build in that type of transparency into the ecosystem.
Cloudaudit.org. See, we're learning new URLs every day. Vineet, come on. Are these gentlemen, are they covering all the bases, or are we missing something in the cloud ecosystem?
They are. I think
they always are missing, right? It's a given.
Yeah. I think I come from a perspective of the application creation, not from the infrastructure, but the SaaS applications and the creators of that, and speak for the development community from that perspective. I think the standardization, the open, there's a lot of lock-in that happens. If you are on a infrastructure, there are certain standards, the published ways of how you're going to publish your AMIs or your images or whatever, and that creates lock-in. I think what we need across all the models, there have to be standards for the infrastructure, for the platforms that allows application creators almost like, write once and run on any cloud, kind of a standardization. I think that's one of the things that we're missing, needs to evolve, has to be a community plus the standardization community's effort.
Well, unbeknownst to you, that's a perfect cue for Bill, because it turns out that Microsoft have had this kind of epiphany over cloud computing. Am I not right, Bill, that Microsoft has suddenly become a kind of an interoperable outfit, or am I just drinking the Kool-Aid?
A little bit of the Kool-Aid.
Oh, that's an honest answer. This is the evangelist for Microsoft.
We are, as you've probably heard, we are all in the cloud.
Oh, you're certainly
we're
all
very
in the
big
cloud. We got
believer
that
in
bit.
cloud. I'd like to say a couple of words about the open source question,
Sure.
because it's kind of odd to hear someone from Microsoft talking about
But
open
that's
source.
why you're here, Bill.
But we've really done quite a bit working with the open source community. We have people running our PHP toolkit, which we've produced. We have an Eclipse plugin for Java developers to actually access resources in the cloud. We even have people running Apache Tomcat in Windows Azure instead of Internet Information Server.
Now, Rich looks surprised. I can just warn
I'm
you.
thrilled.
2 places away, he's thrilled.
I'm
Eucalyptus systems
also
thrilled.
glad that he's here, because we even, I think, donated our hypervisor to the OpenStack project, right? So we do a lot working with open source. We're proprietary just like all the other major cloud vendors, but we work pretty closely with the open source community.
You know what's missing, though, is the cloud distro. Right, we've got Linux distros,
Linux
but we don't
background,
have the cloud distro. It's a new distribution model. It's a new way of combining software. Clouds aggregate software the way Linux aggregates software for single platforms. Clouds are distributed.
Is that a realistic goal?
I think so. I think it's going to happen. I don't even think it needs to be.
Right. It's just going to blossom up.
That's the beauty of open source community.
We haven't heard from you, Zachary, down there. What are we missing?
Here.
Just because you're so far away. Come on.
Well, I'm
all
actually
these
going to.
elderly gentlemen.
Yeah,
what
I
are
know.
they
The young
missing?
whippersnappers here. I'm going to actually agree that interoperability is a huge part of this whole ecosystem. I mean, we're a cloud provider. Everybody here is selling some kind of different service. But when you get down to it, so many people are still just trying to move their application. They've got a huge escape velocity to actually get and use these different services. The last thing they want to do is move into another closed garden, a different API, somebody else's environment. So interoperability between the cloud providers, I think, is something that we could all benefit from.
Okay, well, we can't leave the room without grasping this particular elephant, because I've been watching those slides and making my notes, and I was told that there weren't going to be public, private, hybrid slides. That wasn't true, was it? That was not true. So hands up if you today showed, because I know you're all speakers too, you showed a public, hybrid. So where are we on that, in all seriousness? I mean, I've heard this sliced and diced so many ways. Many people are saying that there's no such distinction any longer.
Well, we started that way. We started with a distinction, but all of the vendors, all of the major cloud providers are bleeding over into each other's space. You've got Amazon with Elastic Beanstalk. You've got Microsoft with the Windows Azure Web and Web Role, VM Role. So we're all kind of, we started in the sweet spot, but we're all kind of impinging on the same, on the same side. I think the model, as an architectural model, though, still works as a way of separating things in your mind and thinking about things.
So, I mean, has the model, though, become more sophisticated? If we started with our little pyramid there with the 3, have we now got private and public making it 6, and hybrid down the middle making it 9? Well, like we've got a sort of thin sliver there of the...
Yeah, if you look at the National Institute of Standards model, they've got a series of characteristics, deployments, and architectural models. And again, I had some slides in my presentation yesterday on that. They have a pretty good model for looking at all the cloud providers, public and private, hybrid, community, all the different kinds of clouds. I will say that Microsoft's focus right now is more on hybrid clouds, even though we have a tremendously strong public cloud in Windows Azure. We also believe that the future is companies that have some things on-premise and some things in the cloud, and the desire to make those things work together.
Is there anybody who thinks it couldn't be a mixture?
Could or could not?
Down the line, Logan.
So I'll talk about it a little bit differently. The conversation around public, private, hybrid reminds me of the late 90s, early 2000s when we were all running around talking about intranets, extranets, and the internet, right?
Well, we like typologies.
And frankly, this is about context of deployment. The reason we had those conversations back in that day was frankly because all of the technologies, you couldn't use them in all contexts of deployment. Same is true of cloud computing as it exists today. Not all of the technologies that we deploy today can be used in all contexts. I think that's what I've seen from a lot of the OEMs and ISVs working on, whether it's an IaaS stack or a PaaS stack or otherwise, they're all working to solve that problem today. They don't talk about it because it involves future product. But the reality is they're all moving to take these technologies that are currently either in a public space or a private space and moving so that they can be deployed in any context, whether that's on-premise, off-premise, bursting, or transporting workloads between them. So I would just posit that if you look forward into the next 12, 18 months or so, I think the whole conversation around public-private hybrid starts to dissipate, and context of deployment becomes a little bit more relevant.
Yeah, I want to second that. There's really 2 models. There's a technology model, and that's common, right? The public-private at the technological level is very, very similar. Then there's a usage model, and that comes in 3 flavors: public, private, and hybrid. You can use the same technologies for all 3 different usage models.
Distinction.
That's a good distinction. And I think that's where we're going to see it.
Let's put Rich to the test, because I'm not so keen on typologies, but I love words. The only thing is I only like one word. So this is a down the line starting with you, Rich, which means that you get the most time to think about this, Zack. So start using it. I'm an enterprise. I've heard about this cloud computing thing, and I'm the CEO, and I'm short of time. And I just want to know from my CTO, what is the one thing, one word, it could be 2 words, but it's one thing that completely changes forever and for always because of this whole cloud computing thing, Rich? I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, IT management process changes, right? It becomes much more streamlined, much more agile. We talk about agile development, we're going to have agile IT.
So I'm happy, I'm the CEO, I'm happy, I think great, so it's a good
Fast
thing.
is cheap.
Vineet?
I think what's also going to change is there's a lot of behavior. I think in words, the internal IT users are going to demand different kind of services from the IT organization.
So
They're getting
should I
used.
be happy? I'm the CEO, remember. I've got a lot of time. I mean, so that's good or that's bad?
That's good. That's good in the sense that you are able to deliver. There's productivity increases. Internal IT users today are exposed to a certain way of working. There are cloud computing things that work in our personal lives today, right? There are behaviors, there's usability that's driving productivity. I can increase the productivity of internal IT processes, internal IT things by using cloud computing.
Okay, that sounds fast again. I'm going to cut you off because I'm the CEO. I don't have a lot of time. Bill knows that I'm impatient.
Okay, the change to an operating expenditure model as opposed to a capital expenditure
that.
model.
You get some more words. That's nice. I wanted to hear that.
Okay.
So that's genuine. That's
and also
BS.
dynamic scalability, the ability to scale up and scale down on demand, rather than having to buy things in big chunks and big quantums.
Okay, so that's still a real compelling point. Scott.
Maybe to carry on with that, I mean, I think it's the shift from asset management to service management. Right? I think it breeds a culture of innovation. I think it changes and to some degree simplifies IT.
We'll be coming back to that in a moment. Mark.
I'd say it's your speed to opportunity and your ability to capitalize on things much more quickly than you have in the past.
Time to value. I love all that stuff. Time to value.
Same kind of thought, flexibility, really, the ability to react rapidly to changing business demand, where, in the past it takes 3 to 6 months to react to any demand from the business. It's an ability to do that in days and weeks, not months and years.
Zack.
I'm going to combine two. I firmly believe in the OpEx model. I think that's a huge shift, and we see that constantly out in the marketplace. I think that's the one word that will get the CTO interested. The second one is service delivery model, and I think that captures all this speed. The way that their users, their internal IT users, are demanding these applications or services has changed, and we're just responding to it.
Now, Scott mentioned innovation. I said I wanted to circle back to that because one of the things, I can't speak for the audience, but I'm guessing one of the things that's new about this particular Cloud Expo, even changing from the last one on the West Coast, and of course it'll change again, is I have never seen so many happy technologists. It's like, oh my God, technology is back. There's all these disasters. You're still happy. And that seems to be, in a genuine sense, because the value that you're adding to organizations seems to have been returned to the very top of the agenda. Am I guessing correctly? It's something to do with that? Why are you all so happy? Rich, come on, you look happy.
I am happy. Whenever there's a technology shift, there's tremendous opportunity for growth, and there's tremendous opportunity for disaster. But technologists live for both, right? And that's what we're seeing. The idea behind cloud 2 years ago was really exciting in the business community, but technologists were trying to get their heads around what to do about it. Was it feasible? How feasible was it? Should we refactor old technologies that we're familiar with or come up with new approaches? We've kind of come through that. We are now at the place where the technologists are building around what the hype promised 24 months ago.
Who's the next most happiest?
I'm pretty happy.
Come on, Bill.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy because I always tell people that I always do well in a revolution. And we're really in the middle of a revolution. It's really a paradigm shift, not totally to the cloud, but to start leveraging the cloud so that businesses have another dimension that they can use to solve their business problems.
But Bill, we've heard all this before, but the difference seems to be that this is actually real. How do you know the difference between one of the usual hype cycles and something that's actually real? It's quite exciting.
I kind of think last year, I was here talking at Cloud Expo last year, and I thought the hype cycle was more in evidence then. I think now there are more providers, public cloud and private cloud providers, that are starting to have a track record. And it's really the track record. So.
You know it's real when the apps show up, right?
Yes.
Technologists will be there first, telling you the technology is great. We've seen this a lot. We saw this with grid computing. When you see the apps, when you see people who are devoting their business at the application layer to this model, that's when it's real. And that's what we're starting to see.
Do we agree with that? Is that the benchmark? Vineet, this was your point, so you can...
Okay. Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to add before I move to that is that I'm happy because it opens up for a technologist. What makes us really happy is innovation, the speed at which we can innovate, the tools which we have, new things that we can do. So it's opening up opportunities for innovation within the enterprise, where things that we couldn't do earlier takes time to do, it's opening up faster.
Mark, are you happier than you've ever been?
I think so, and I think it's not a matter of...
Show me your happy look.
That's horrible. Sorry to scare you people.
Put that camera away.
So I think that the key point is high availability and scalability and all these things we've had for a long time. But now that those things are accessible to a lot more people through economies of scale, and the cloud has enabled a broader set of people to take advantage of those assets and actually have a larger pool of users. Makes it more attractive to everyone.
Scott, I like Richard's point that you're happy even if it's bad, because there's more challenges and more security issues to get your teeth into.
Yeah, and now I can sync my iPhone without plugging it in, right? Yes, I mean, of course. I mean, it's the spirit of innovation that I think is, throughout the entire stack, right? And it's not just that we're seeing the innovation within inside of the enterprise, which certainly is happening by embracing the cloud. Yes, there's a ton of security challenges that go with that. But on the other side, the innovation that's happening, even in how security is being delivered, as security is now being delivered from the cloud, using the cloud. I mean, we have a global threat intelligence network that is a cloud-based solution, where we turn all those McAfee endpoints and gateways and firewalls into threat sensors, right? And so we're using the cloud to do analytics, to correlate threats. But that speaks to the other half, which is there's a lot of innovation from the cloud providers themselves, which I think is going to make everybody happy.
Logan, I had the feeling listening to Michael Dell. Who was here at the keynote to hear Michael Dell saying hello to everybody at Cloud Expo? Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, there's one of the great iconic technology pioneers being more fired up about the cloud than I was expecting. And I'm suspecting you go top, bottom as much as any other organization, and bottom up as well. So is that sort of Dell's going all in, to use the Microsoft phrase? Is that coming from above, or is it throughout the organization?
It permeates Dell today. I mean, one of the reasons I'm happy to follow the theme is because I'm surrounded by all of these people here today. I'm having so many conversations with so many smart people with new, innovative ideas that you can't not be happy in this environment. But I think the industry is facing a bit of a chasm here. When you look at the traditional delivery models of IT and how IT has been delivered over the course of the last few decades, switching from that into something that is fundamentally transformative to how we deliver these services internally is not a flash-in-the-pan type of activity. It's a long haul. It's a 10-year transformation. I think what we're starting to see today is we're starting to see companies begin their journey, right? They're taking that non-mission critical, low-risk, high-value application and transforming that into a stateless-based architecture that can be deployed into a cloud-based environment. And they're beginning to see the results of that, and they're getting excited about it, which generates opportunity for the industry to capitalize on. And that's pretty exciting.
10-year cycle, Zack? Is that what making you happy? The next 10 years of your life all sorted?
I think if you're being real and you're being a truth teller, I think that's a pretty pragmatic point of view.
Do you agree?
Well, on the lighter side, I'm happy because my mom knows what cloud computing is, so that's good, and business is good. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely at the start of this. That's really exciting to see people who are just beginning to realize benefits from this, and then you realize how much opportunity is out there that they can start to tap within their organizations and applications that can be delivered in this model.
Okay, let's focus then on what you can do with the cloud. What is the most interesting thing? It doesn't have to be anything you've revealed before, but it can be something you're always revealing, whether it's to your mother or your children. What's the most interesting thing that you believe is only possible because of the cloud, Rich? Something that we can now do that we couldn't do before, or the businesses
You can run a cloud in your house, and you're going to have to do this, right? What we're really doing now is creating...
Just stop. I want that line again. You
Sure.
can run a cloud in your
house.
I feel that's going to be reported and tweeted. You can run a cloud in your house.
Yep.
Says the CTO of Eucalyptus.
That's right.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you can go on.
Oh, thank you. It's inevitable, right? I mean, the point about switching to services versus assets is true for people, right? I mean, when you use your iPhone, when you have this digital life, you really are using a bunch of services, and you're going to want more and more control over those services because they are a bigger and bigger part of your life. So whether it's in your house or in your data house or whatever it is, you're going to have a personal cloud at some point.
I love that. Personal cloud. This is the free-for-all this round. Best thing being done with the cloud. Bill. No, it's Zack. You do it. Come on.
I mean, from my perspective, it's this large-scale automation. I mean, it's so interesting to watch what people can do when they have access to huge amounts of infrastructure with 15 lines of code. It's really, I think, what's going to come out of that is super interesting.
See, only a real geek would say that is super interesting, large-scale automation.
Well,
no, it is.
He's got a point, though. I mean, but to me, it's extending that thought and saying the impact to the end user, the person who doesn't know anything about technology. You think about the impact to the transformational abilities, all of the things that cloud can bring in areas like healthcare and education and providing services that were never possible before. You think about the impact to proactive health management, body area networks collecting data from you, uploading through your smartphone into healthcare networks, and your doctor calling you on the phone and going, you know what, your blood pressure's running a little high, can you stop by at 2 p.m. before a problem emerges?
Oh, that's too scary.
Yeah, I know, right?
Give me uplifting apps that I can look forward to. Scott, I know you've got a use case that's just bursting to be shared with the world.
Several. From a security perspective, right, I think what's interesting about the cloud and from an end user viewpoint is that it's changing the models for how we collaborate, right? And what's interesting to think about is consumers have always impacted the collaboration models within the enterprise. I mean, whether you're going back to web-based email or instant messaging and now Dropbox, I mean, those types of models are only going to be amplified when you add the social graph on top, right? And so when you start thinking about security and where it's going, we're seeing this fundamental shift, which is moving away from, well, let's track all the bad actors in the world. Let's figure out how we can track all of the bad viruses, because we can't keep up. The cloud is enabling us to basically go the inverse route. Let's identify the good actors. And now that there's 700 million people plus on social networks that are mapping their relationships out, you're going to see a model that's about trust management. And that's going to enable a safer cloud. It's going to enable an ecosystem inside of the cloud that's going to be more secure and more relevant and more personalized.
That's a great insight.
What it's also doing, if you look at the other side of cloud computing, it's democratizing IT. It's making things available to the non-developed world. It's like you have the $10 computer or the laptop, you now have a $1 server. You can rent a server for $1 an hour. And that's opening up opportunities for new applications and new businesses and new innovations to be delivered in the area, I would agree, like healthcare, in the area of education, in the developing economy. So that opens up a tremendous area where it's taking the computing power and the power of the IT to people where it was not available.
I like that, democratizing IT. Mark, one thing stick in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's really the ability for the researchers to collaborate, and I've seen a lot of the pharma and really genomics people who can now have a common platform to share their data, crunch their numbers, and really accelerate their research curves, and that to me is fascinating.
So problem sets are crumbling, and then maybe new problem sets that were inaccessible will be put up there and tackled. Yeah, that is uplifting. This is getting quite uplifting, this whole thing. Continue the note of optimism, Bill.
Okay, and I am, but I'm going to take it from the standpoint, from the viewpoint of the CTO, because that's what we're here for. And for the CTO, the great thing is to be able to align IT with business more directly. We've all read IT Doesn't Matter, right? We've all read the book, and IT has been trying to recover from that book for quite a few years. But it is the ability to provide what the business needs when the business needs it, because that's why we exist. And we exist to support the business. We're not a we're not self-contained. We're there for the business. From the standpoint of consumerism, the cloud, the fact that the cloud will eventually disappear, that people will just take it for granted, it'll be there, it'll support all these gazillion phones and other devices that are out there. To me, that's exciting.
All right, well, you've really stolen the thunder for the last question, which is a terribly simple one. Here we are at 8th Cloud Expo, and I shudder to guess how many more Cloud Expos we can have. But at what point will this just be called Expo? Which is going to be difficult to trademark and defend, but I mean, that's the reality. How long is that going to take? Logan, you like these cycles. You said 10 years. You cheered me up there.
Well, it's a lot longer than people think it is. And I think the future for cloud and the underlying technologies are really a compression of all of these technologies into an application delivery platform. As you think about the complexity of all of the various things in IT that go into, whether it's governance, whether it's systems management, whether it's monitoring, application development, all of these things are fundamentally compressing down into becoming an application in and of themselves, where we're developing and deploying business logic to solve a business problem, right? And I think that continues to get more and more abstracted to the point where the people who have that business problem are able to use those systems in a much more interactive and thoughtful way to solve the problem, as opposed to hunting down the guy who runs the router in your data center in order to enable something.
That makes sense to me. Is the term CTO ever going to die, Rich? By the same token?
God, I
now it's
hope
becoming
not.
business. Well, I know you're hoping. You and me alike. I'm hoping
Yeah,
Cloud Expo,
well.
you're hoping CTO, but it's all going to change.
No, I don't think so. I think that what the cloud is doing is, as we pointed out, is lifting the abstraction layer. Right? We no longer have to think about the individual connectivity components, the individual resource components that go into the data center when we're managing IT. It's abstract. It's the way that when we move to more abstract languages from assembly language and C 20 years ago. And so that's still technology that needs to be managed. It's just being managed much more powerfully. And I think it will always be the CTO's job, hopefully, to explain the value of that technology to the business.
And if in doubt, call yourself cloud technology officers, and you might get 10 more years. Who knows?
At least.
We are not going to keep the audience because they've got other things to do. They didn't eat and stuff like that. I'm very impressed to see how many people will come instead of eating. It's marvelous. So I'm going to thank you on your behalf, Rich Wolski, Eucalyptus Systems, Vineet Tyagi from Impetus, Bill Zack from Microsoft, Scott Chasin from McAfee, Mark Hinkle from Cloud.com, Logan McLeod from Dell, and absolutely last but not least, our youngest and strongest new contender, Zack Smith from Voxel in the pinkest shirt at the show.
That's right.
Thank you, audience, and thank you, panel. Let's start the afternoon, I think. Or maybe we've got a little few minutes. Thank them all, please.